welcome everyone who's tuning into the live stream. Second meeting of the Informational Advisory Committee for the Petaluma Fairgrounds Advisory Panel process. We're still waiting on, I believe, one or two folks. Lynn, would you mind getting in touch with Ingrid to make sure she remembers this time? Let me just check my roster for who else we are missing.
Yeah, I'll check for anybody who's not here right now.
Okay, sounds good. I know Onita is sick today and can't join us, unfortunately. Hoping that we'll be joined by Kevin, her alternate, but we'll see about that. And let's see, waiting on John to join, I believe still, and Christy. So we'll give them just one more moment here. Thanks so much, everyone. And Anna, can you hear us okay? I know okay, fantastic. Just wanted to make sure. And would you mind trying to take yourself off mute just to confirm that your sound is good for us?
Yeah, now I can. Before, at the very beginning, I couldn't, but now I think I got it. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank
Nice
you.
meeting you.
Yeah, it's really nice to meet you too. Right. Okay. Well, Lynn is messaging Christy, Ingrid, and John, but I think we should go ahead and get started to stay on schedule. So hi, everybody. It's so nice to see some of your faces for the first time and about half of your faces for the second time since Lynn and I divided up those onboarding meetings. Again, Alex Ranieri, Program Co-Director with Healthy Democracy. Lynn and I will be trading back and forth facilitation of this group. And thanks so much, Lynn, for taking last week as I got to take some time away from town with my family. So, but very happy to be back and to hit the ground running with this group and this process. And let's get started. So today we've got a pretty full agenda, but also lots and lots of time for discussion and deliberation. It was so great to see folks in our presenter nomination sheet all day today, furiously working away. I think we went from about 10 at the beginning of the day to close to 60 last time I looked. So thank you all for your diligence and hard work even between meetings. And we'll have lots more time to work on that today. But before we dive into those things, just wanted to start with first introductions. We have at least one new face with us today. And we did a whole round of introductions that Hector, I believe you saw in the video, but would you mind telling us about you for a couple moments here?
Sure. Hi, I'm Hector Coelho. I want to say I was born in San Francisco, Petaluma. I was actually born in San Francisco and raised in Petaluma. And I live about 4 blocks away from the fairgrounds. And it was the same place I was raised in. I bought the house when I could. And my kids, and I have 2 kids, they've been raised in the same place, and we love Petaluma.
Fantastic. And can you name the stakeholder category that you're representing, Hector?
Yes, the fairgrounds. I think that's the category.
The current property tenants.
Okay, current, yes, yes. And I'm a manager at Play Dog Play.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
Great. So as we're kind of sorting out attendance today, I wanted to just put out a reminder to everybody that since these meetings really do build on each other and are kind of intensive for this, 6-week period, we're asking that folks designate an alternate. Oh, I'm going to stop myself in the middle of that sentence actually, and welcome Ingrid. So nice to have you here, Ingrid.
Hi, I'm so sorry. We're doing our first in-person council meeting tonight with hybrid Zoom, and it's very interesting from an IT perspective. So I just lost track of time for a second.
No,
my apologies. Nice to see everyone.
Yeah, thank you. And we just did an introduction from the other member who wasn't able to join last week. So Ingrid, would you mind just saying who you're representing on the IAC and a little bit about your involvement with the fairgrounds process?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. My name's Ingrid Alverde. I use pronouns she, her. I am the director of the City of Petaluma Office of Economic Development and Open Government, which is a new combination of divisions, including economic development, communications, and information technology. So our team has played a huge role in managing technology through COVID, making sure staff can work remotely, making sure all of our meetings are open to the public like this in Zoom. And I've also, again, from an economic development and communications lens, had an involvement with fairgrounds in terms of our community outreach plan, and looking forward to getting to know this group and helping inform the panel that was recently selected so that we can have this really exciting community dialogue about the future of our fairgrounds.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ingrid. And thanks for making this work even before council meeting. I know that must be a scramble. All right. So as I was saying, we recognize everybody is busy and most of you have other roles, if not many other roles in the community. We so appreciate your attendance as, week to week, this committee's work will really build on itself. So if at all possible, we so appreciate you being here, but we're also asking folks to designate an alternate just in case of illness or, an absolutely unmissable something else. So I noticed that I think we have alternates for about half of you at this point, and some of you were checking on timing or other considerations. So just a request you're welcome to put a name and an email address in the chat to me, or just send an email to me, Lynn, and Tiffany, but would love to get those on record, just so if you do have to miss a meeting for any reason, hopefully you can send somebody in your place, catch them up, and they can participate. So as to make sure that your your expertise and interests are not lost in any part of the process. So a brief reminder on that front. I also wanted to just draw everybody's attention real quick here as another piece of housekeeping to the shared folder. I know Lynn mentioned this last week, but there's a shared Google Drive folder where we'll be sharing agendas, meeting minutes, kind of all other documents that the IAC is working with. And I want to show you what that looks like, just so you know to use that. It's really a resource for you. And I wanted to use that as our jumping off point to find today's agenda and go through our agenda. So here is what we'll be up to today: arrival, review and introductions, talking just a little bit of housekeeping and where we are in this process. And then most of today's meeting, as you know, will be discussing, nominating introductory presenters to the panel. We'll have probably a little break. I don't know about you all, but I've been on Zoom all day, so take a little bio break halfway through, and then assess gaps. Throughout the day, we'll be continuing to assess gaps in that presenter list. And also, depending on where we get to at the end of the meeting, in that time, we might start to begin to categorize the presenters as well, just so it'll make your lives easier when we get around to prioritizing the list next week. Then we'll talk about next steps and kind of what that prioritization process will look like, and make sure that everybody has what they need to come prepared for next meeting. So that's that. Any questions about kind of this shared file system or the agenda for today?
I have a question, and my apologies if I missed the direction. I did go back and watch the last meeting, but I may have missed something. Was I to submit presenters in the Google form, or are we doing that today?
Yes, and.
Okay.
So the Google form has been open since last week. Folks were welcome to submit presenter ideas as they had the time. And we will also, a principle in the panel process is we really don't like giving homework because it creates real accessibility differentials. So we'll try to do that here too. Any homework we give you, try to give you time in meetings to do that. So probably a longer answer than you wanted, Ingrid, but.
Oh, that's okay. As long as I feel like we might have sent a list, but I don't believe it went into a form. So
Yeah.
if that was the case, I would go populate it right now while we were talking, but I'll wait.
Yeah, we'll have time to do that together in a moment. Katie.
I just wanted to make sure as we start talking and people come up with different ideas, I think it's going to spark other ideas for people as we move on here. So we can still add to the list after tonight, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. The current deadline that we've set is end of tomorrow for initial presenter ideas. And I want to come back to that at the very end of today's meeting, and ultimately let you all decide what that deadline absolutely is this week. We're balancing a couple of different needs there. So yeah, thanks, Katie. Diana, and reminder to lower your hand, Katie.
Yeah, my question revolves around contacting our stakeholder groups and what methods or strategies are people using to get the input from other stakeholders that they are representing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that could be added to the agenda for 5 minutes, or if you want to say something about that, you know, what level of responsibility do we have to be in contact, and how are we going to take all that input, and is that the input we're taking to put in our statements to the panel, as well as input that is informing our speaker selections?
Yeah, great questions. I think we can spend a moment on that now, and then revisit it also when we talk about next steps at the end of the meeting, because there might be some more to discuss at that stage. But I can share a little bit about how I've been conceptualizing this piece, and then if others have anything to share about how you all are actually going about that work, please feel free to join in. So what I've done, Lynn or myself has done for all of you is send an email to you, BCCing, so blind copying everybody else who we have contact information for and the other stakeholder groups that were nominated. So a little bit of an imperfect method, but I didn't want to assume that all of the stakeholder contact info that we have, that those folks would want their information shared, but you all gave us permission to share your contact info. So that gave folks the option of sending you input, and in certain cases where people have really wanted to be in touch, I'm always happy to make an e-introduction if both parties are okay with that. And the idea is that kind of broad representation of your stakeholder category will happen for both deliverables. So presenter recommendations and the stakeholder statement. I think exactly what that looks like, how much time, you know, that takes, how many conversations are had, will look quite different for each of you, because different lists of groups, different relationships with those groups, and there's no exact requirement about how much time outside these meetings folks spend doing that kind of active representation work. So I guess those are my thoughts. Does anyone else want to share, you know, how you've been navigating that role?
I can tell you, I've talked with some neighbors. So I represent the neighbors, which is, I don't know how many thousand people in Midtown area. But I've spoken with a couple of them and had conversations on email, and they like to collect a lot of input from neighbors, so that they're going to put stuff up in Nextdoor and create a Google form for concerns and wishes and suggestions. Put up a flyer in the library, because the library is used by a lot of people who reside in Midtown. And then depending on what the stakeholder statement, your expectations are for that, I'll somehow, take all that input. We have like 10 people's input at this point, and massage it into some format that's appropriate for a stakeholder statement. And then in the process, I'm trying to identify some speakers, some people who've lived in the area for 60 years, 70 years, or 20 or 30 years, who might be willing to speak about their experiences. So is that along the lines of your expectations?
I think that is beyond my expectations as IAC members. I think, I know that you've been so attentive to that component of this role, Diana, and I appreciate that. And I guess I will just reiterate too that for that kind of broader public engagement, folks who want to be involved in the fairgrounds process, the city will be running some concurrent opportunities. I believe, I can't speak for Ingrid and their side of things, but there will be a survey, there will be other opportunities for folks to get involved. So I guess I would just say, Diana, don't feel like the entire world is on your shoulders in that role. The neighbors category is and broad. So.
The neighbors category is very broad, and they hadn't heard anything, and they didn't know what other kinds of public input would be taken, or when that would happen, or how that's going to figure into the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think since we have these kind of IAC deliverables cutoff points coming up, just feel free to be in touch with me to direct folks to other engagement opportunities once those deadlines happen. Okay, let's go to Kim.
So when I had my onboard meeting with Alex and Lynn, I did ask if it would be appropriate to share the information about what's happening in our meetings and other opportunities on social media. And I have been sharing these meetings and the links to the agendas and the webpage and the YouTube channel on my own personal social media outlets. I guess I could share it with a department related social media presence as well, but most, if not all of the people that are on one page are also their mutual friends. And so they'll see the information twice. But I also brought it up and I've had people contact me about different components of this process and the fairgrounds and its use in the future. And then I did have one person reach out directly to me, and we Zoomed last week from the list of folks, I think from Alex's original stakeholder group, that list. So Zoomed with one person, just getting general feedback about the process in general and concerns over transparency and what that looks like and what that means. And so I'm trying to be as open about that and all of this as I can. And in our department chair meeting last week at school, I also asked for feedback from my colleagues, because I know there are groups, underrepresented groups, who often use the fairgrounds that we don't hear about a lot. And so some of that student leadership, I think, is important to hear from them or their advisors or both as we move forward, and how families and different cultural groups might use the fairgrounds and the facilities and keep that role in place and the availability for them. So that's just part of how I've gone about seeking info and input.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Can I ask a question about that? Because, and I'm just curious. So for instance, Kimberly, you're with the high school, right? Is that correct? You're a teacher?
I am a teacher, but my stakeholder group is agriculture. It's the agriculture.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So you would be, when you're connecting, would you also reach out to other agriculture related groups, like maybe the 4-H or the FFA? Is that what you were thinking?
So I am the FFA part.
Okay. Oh, perfect.
And then all the people you just mentioned are
Mhm.
mutual friends of mine on
Got
Facebook
it.
or contact for my personal stuff or my FFA related stuff. And I've put them on, I've filled out and populated the Google form with those
Perfect.
folks for those purposes.
Awesome.
And just sort of, like when we don't think of tourism as part of agriculture, but agritourism is a growing component in our area.
Mhm.
And so one of the broad groups that I put in the Google form today were event planners. So if we're looking at increasing foot traffic or use of a facility, why or why not? Why are they or why are they not using the fairgrounds for events? And I mean,
Right,
I think
especially agricultural related events, right? Because of the
Right.
agritourism or that kind of thing.
Right. Or,
Yeah.
why is it not a venue of choice? What prevents them? And I think I know some of the answers to those questions, but I would like industry experts to speak to that.
Yeah.
And if we reimagined venues and agriculture and tourism, what does that look like?
Yeah.
How could we use those spots for that?
Thank you. Yeah, great conversation. Thanks for asking that, Ingrid, and sharing those strategies, Kim. I think that's really useful to hear just from a couple of people around how you're reaching out to others in those categories. I want to move us along. I appreciate this coming into the agenda, and it means that we're a tiny bit behind schedule now. But I think I would encourage anybody else who has questions or wants to brainstorm about that component, please, feel free to reach out to me, and especially on other ways of engaging that'll come later in the process. So, okay. There is a small, or actually to back up real quick, I want to just paint a picture. I like to remind us where we are in the process from week to week. So we know what we're doing at this stage. I've already talked about next week, week 3 of the IAC. We'll be prioritizing that introductory presenter list. The following 3 weeks will be divided kind of among 3 other tasks. That welcome packet with stakeholder statements, reviewing some process design, and completing the menu of options for other presenters. So just to remind us of where we are and where we're going. So I want to move on. We've inserted a small extra component to the agenda that actually is just falling in this first bucket, but is a kind of a different topic. We're hoping this will be quick, but we realized that we were making a process design decision last week, and it's the kind of decision that we really would like the IAC to make, and not Healthy Democracy to make. And that relates to kind of additional information that goes into the panelist briefing packet. So Lynn and I want to just talk about this concept, make a proposal, and have hopefully a quick decision-making process from this group before we move on to the bulk of the meeting, talking about presenters. So essentially, panelists are getting information that is curated by you all through obviously these presenters and the stakeholder statements. We recognize that there's also a whole bunch of other information on the policy context, technical studies, documents, everything under the sun that relates to kind of the background knowledge the panelists will need to know before being able to really deliberate on this topic. And we also recognize that this is a stakeholder group that includes the city and the Fair Board, the 4th District DAA, both of whom are both stakeholders in the process and decision makers who the panel will be delivering recommendations to. So they play kind of a unique role in this process. The city and the 4th District DAA both hold perhaps more background information about the fairgrounds because of that kind of dual role. So essentially what we would like to propose is that in addition to the kind of stakeholder statements that everybody in this group will provide in that initial briefing packet that goes to panelists, that there is a certain number of pages of other background briefing documents that the city and the Fair Board provide to panelists. And we've brought a proposal around what we think would be a good balance point between giving the panel the information that they need to do their work and not so much information that there will be real accessibility barriers to folks being able to digest and use that information. So we'll put that on the table. Would love to have some discussion. Welcome any objections or counter proposals. But we're thinking 10 pages per entity might be a reasonable starting place. So I guess first, any clarifying questions about this new kind of piece I've introduced? And then if we don't have any clarifying questions, I'll ask if there are any objections or concerns with that proposal.
So you're saying each side can present 10 pieces of information or a summary report, or is it written, or?
Yeah, so this would be written briefing documents that would be printed alongside kind of those stakeholder statements, what panelists get day one in the room, and not necessarily 10 pieces of information, just 10 pages. It can be any document that each of those parties think is absolutely critical to come into the process at that stage. It could be one document that's 10 pages, it could be 20 that are each half a page. As long as it's a reasonable font size, we're not going to police what that looks like.
I had a question about that. Was that 10 pages when you said both sides? Is that for each person on this panel or just for the city and the DAA?
Yeah, this would be just one unique scenario where just the city and the DAA had that additional access or additional information because of their role both as stakeholder and those framing the decision-making context.
And I'm also curious if the group wants to weigh in. There are several documents that have been produced in the past that talk about the fairgrounds and opportunities and challenges around the fairgrounds, some of which were produced by the city, some of which are produced by the fair DAA. And I'm curious from this group's perspective, if that's information we want to provide, or we just have it on our website and people can look it up if they want to. Just open to thoughts and ideas about that.
So that, Ingrid, I'm thinking kind of the reason why we're proposing this in this way is that I don't think there's time for this committee to necessarily vet all of those 10 pages. I wonder if the city would be willing, if we do kind of accept this proposal, to come up with that content, and then we could talk, at a later date if you wanted to bring that back to this committee for some feedback. I think that would be appropriate, but do you mind if we table that for a later meeting?
Not at all.
Okay. Thank you. Great. Marianne.
Can you give an example of what you would expect to be in this 10-page?
Yeah, I wonder if I could actually pass that back to Ingrid then. I don't necessarily want to delve into content here, but I'm thinking some broad examples are technical studies, kind of summaries of other public engagement that have happened on the topic, perhaps, legal documents, a history, background. Those are some kind of broad ideas of what might find a place in these briefing documents. Things about the policy context. What's that?
What about financial studies?
Yeah, we'll keep a hands-off approach to what each entity wants to put in those briefing documents. Really anything that helps equip the panel with what they need to kind of begin
Mhm.
begin their work at the outset. And anything else you would like to add there, Ingrid, since I know Christy.
Well, yeah. So we've been starting to think through like what would be helpful from our end to provide. And like I said, there are lots of reports that have done in the past. We started just internally with staff, for instance, even just describing a little bit of the planning process and what that means from a legal perspective and how that applies to the fairgrounds as it relates to existing documents. Some kind of summaries. I think Alex, what you mentioned would make sense. Just maybe kind of a term sheet about the lease. You know, people have a lot of questions about the lease, like when it was executed, when it expires, you know, how it worked, things like that.
Okay.
I think now's the first time I'm hearing about 10 pages, which I think that seems reasonable. That's a lot to ask someone to read. We at the city are great at writing super long reports, so that'll be extra work, but I prefer higher level simplified versions of things. And then, you know, like I said, on our website, we always provide the full document if someone wants to go in and look at the historic resources, you know, study or what have you, or if you want to read the existing general plan.
Okay, great. Thanks for that context, Ingrid.
Okay.
Yeah, that's helpful. Does that answer your question, Marion?
Generally, yeah.
Okay, great. Let's move on to Jerry and then Kim, and then I'll ask for to see if we can find some consensus around this. Jerry, go ahead.
Thank you. So did I understand you, Ingrid, correctly that that information is now available on the city website? The past document exchange?
Yeah, so if you go to cityofpetaluma.org/fairgrounds.
Okay.
You can flip through there, and if you kind of go, there's a lot of explanation about where we are in our process and what we're planning to do this summer. But if you scroll down, there's a section of kind of where we've been, and I think there are 5 different documents, some notes from different subcommittee meetings, etc.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Kim? And Kim, I'm sorry, do you prefer Kim or Kimberly in this setting?
Oh, Kim is fine.
All right.
Thank you for asking. I also commented in the chat. I do think that the information Ingrid is telling us is out there and available would also, as we familiarize ourselves with it, would be helpful in eliminating some redundancy in what presenters might offer in the stakeholder statements and different presentations to the committee or the panel. And more informed decision making happens when we have information. So if we are directed to it or shown that it lives in a place, I think that's super helpful as we move forward, inviting people to make presentations to the committee.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that. I also see Diana's comment in the chat here around, you know, it would be helpful to have those briefing documents before choosing presenters. Unfortunately, I'm not sure, just because of the way the timing of this process, these 2 tasks will kind of be happening in tandem or at the same time. And I fully hear you on that. It's also, from our experience as process designers, really helpful to have redundancies between written materials and presenters. So I think just from that perspective, I wouldn't worry too much about redundancies there. If there's information that is really critical for the panel to hear, and it's both in writing and verbal, then more panelists will, you know, be able to hear it and understand it.
I was thinking, like, for instance, from the city standpoint, maybe there's information about planning, you know, in terms of how things work from a legal perspective, how the lease works, and then maybe our city attorney could be available to present. And also, I think, answer questions, because some of these topics are very technical, and I have a hard time reading them sometimes. So I would probably appreciate, you know, some of those more technical things, or if I want to read it in advance, but get a high level presentation and then ask questions, because I would think if I was on the panel, I'd want to ask a lot of questions too.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, great. Well, Thanks for the rich discussion. It's sounding, I'm not hearing any comments kind of about that seem concerned about this kind of information happening or coming into the process. Are there any concerns with this component overall, or with the 10-page proposal that we've thrown out? I heard your Ingrid, we don't, it's hard to distill down to 10 pages, and also 10 pages is a lot. So any objections or counter proposals to that?
Just so I understand, the panel would get these 10 pages from each of the sides.
Mhm.
They would read through that, and they're going to hear from all the panelists that we agree upon.
Presenters.
Speakers,
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
presenters. But they'll have this information before the presenters.
Right. Typically they receive that information day one, and then there are, times throughout that information gathering phase for folks to actually sit with it, read it, digest it. Yeah, Diana? And then Anna?
Okay, just to make sure. So the panel is going to receive like 140 pages because it's going to be, or is 10 in total?
No, so this would just be for the city and for the Fair Board. So kind of a special, just for those two entities who also have decision-making roles, they would have that opportunity to each entity would get 10 pages.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because I heard somebody say from each of us, so it's not really from each of us. It's just from those two, from the city and for the fairgrounds.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
And
I just had a real quick question. When I'm contacting some people to be presenters, are they only presenting verbally? Are they doing an AV show? Are they submitting printed material, or all three, or what?
Yeah, great question. So they will be presenting verbally. Most of the time people have a slideshow. I don't believe we have any requirement to have a slideshow, but our best practice has typically been to, there's a certain time limit for each presenter, and then we also print their slides so that there's some redundancy for multiple learning styles. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's take a comment from Mark and then Jerry, and then we'll try to wrap this up. And
I'm not sure if we had a census yet, or consensus, but I know coming into this, some of us had questions about zoning and who's the current vendors there. So anything that Ingrid already has, I'm not sure if 10 pages is the right number, but even a link to what she already has that would help get someone up to speed, I'm sure would be helpful. And that's just my quick 2 cents.
Okay. And can I actually dig in there a little bit, Mark? When you say you're not quite sure if 10 pages is the right amount, do you have an objection there that would block consensus, or a different proposal for page length?
No, 10 pages is quite a bit, especially if you're just summarizing everything. So I think 10 pages, you're not talking 140 from different organizations. You're talking just the two, basically. But that'll get someone up to speed as quick as possible if it's just summarized properly. And I'm sure Ingrid's great at that, so should be good.
Okay, so that's support for the 10 pages then.
Support.
Okay, great, thank you. Jerry.
Thanks. Do you have a location where this the panelists will meet, and a physical location where they will meet and the presenters will speak to them and give a slideshow and so on and so forth? Is there a location set?
Yeah. So that's not, I don't believe we've made any of the locations public yet. We're still working with the venues to finalize things, but yes, I think it's fine to say that we'll be at the community center for the first May weekend. So
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll, of course, do all the behind the scenes, inviting presenters, working out logistics with them, getting their slideshows, all of that fun goodness. Okay. So I'm not hearing any objections. I've heard a few supportive comments for that 10 pages. I think let's just take a straw poll here. If you can support the city and the Fair Board each getting 10 pages of briefing documents, maybe raise your hand either physically or using the Zoom hand. And I'm not actually voting. That's confusing, of course. All right, I think I've seen everybody except maybe Kim, or maybe I just missed yours. Do you have any concerns? Okay, great. Perfect. All right, thank you all so much. I love getting practice with decision making early on in these processes. It makes things go smoother when the decisions get more complicated. Ingrid, is that a vote or a question?
That was a vote.
Okay, perfect. It's both great and confusing that you can use any emoji in Zoom now. Okay, perfect. Well, I think what I'd like to do is take our 5-minute bio break now, and we'll come back and we'll dive straight into presenters. So if you have a moment on break, grab that Google form, grab the response sheet that I sent everybody earlier just to have it handy. We'll also be sharing screens, but we'll just spend the rest of the meeting with that task. So take a bio break. Let's be back at 4:50. All right, welcome back, folks. Hello, hello. If you would not like to turn your camera back on for the live stream, but are in fact here joining us back after break, please just throw a thumbs up or any other emoji so I know that you're here and listening. Great. I think maybe Katie we're still waiting on, and possibly Ingrid, but let's dive back in here and they'll join us momentarily. Great.
I'm back, sorry.
Oh, no worries. I've also, you might, if you see a dog face pop up in my screen, it's not an emoji, it is a dog. She's, I think she knows when it's 5 o'clock, she's starting to learn when to come demand my attention. So, alrighty. So let's dive into our main task at hand today, which is determining or continuing to brainstorm introductory presenters to the panel. Thank you again so much to everybody who spent a little bit of time with this over the last week. If you haven't, no worries. We will be taking time in the next few minutes here to be able to present nominate new presenters. So I first just want to start out, I see there are at least 8 or 9 of us in the document already, but I'm going to drop the response form, or excuse me, the response spreadsheet. So where you can view everybody's responses so far in the chat. And that is in the email that I sent out to everybody this morning as well. And I will put it up on my screen, but it's a long spreadsheet now, so we won't be able to see it all on my screen. But I first just want everybody to have a chance to see the presenters that the rest of your committee members have begun to nominate. And as you know, as we set up the form, everybody had, what was it, Lynn, 180 characters, the size of a tweet, to state kind of why you're nominating that presenter or type of presenter. So I'd like us all to just review that list. We'll take 5 minutes or so. You can also review the meeting notes from last week around some conversation regarding which presenters should be nominated. And then we'll come back and have opportunities to kind of discuss who's on the list so far and who's missing. Oh, got it. The 180 characters was not your choosing. The result. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Lynn.
It was. I'm just pressed the enter key too soon.
Perfect. Okay. So 5 minutes of just silent reading time. Again, I'll put some of the responses on my screen, but better to grab that response spreadsheet yourself. And then we'll come back and discuss together. Feel free to raise your hand.
I'm requesting access because it's telling me I don't have access.
Okay. Let me.
I'll look into that.
Okay.
I'm also getting the spreadsheet instead of the form. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I just want everybody to be able to peruse who's been already nominated, and then we'll go back and identify gaps.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry, Ingrid. I'll make sure that the whole folder is shared with you as well after we're out of this meeting.
It should have been shared with everyone. Well, I'm going to double check that. Right, I'll just do the whole folder. And by the way, I did put the link to the form to submit more entries in the chat just now, so it's there as well.
Feel free to let me know if anyone is relying on my screen to do your reading. Feel free to tell me to scroll.
Ingrid, I'm showing that you have access to that with your.
I'm looking at it. I was just not able to type into it. So maybe
Oh,
we're not open to that. And that's where I
yes,
got
no, it's not meant
confused.
for typing. It's a read only. Enter your
Gotcha.
entries into the form that I've put as a link, or it's in your email as well.
Got it.
Let's take 2 more minutes for quiet review. Alrighty. So I see some of you are already in the forum. Fantastic. If you feel like just diving in and continuing, that's great. I think I'm gonna stop my screen share just for a moment and invite a little bit of conversation at this point. Some folks have, been able to nominate presenters. Other folks have not yet, but probably have lists waiting. What themes are we starting to see emerge in this list, and who generally is missing?
I personally thought it was a very extensive and inclusive list for what that's worth.
Great. There's certain kinds, oh, I see Diana. Environmental groups and future visions could be better represented. Okay. And I also see Diana left a comment here. Talk about history of Midtown neighborhood.
History.
Yeah, feel free, Diana, to resubmit. I think this is actually helpful. Resubmit if you'd like to make any edits to any of your submissions. Just go ahead and do a duplicate, and then fix the why it's important for the panel to hear from this person. And then if it's clear it's from you and it's a duplicate name, we'll just go ahead and delete the first one and assume that it's a revision. Okay, perfect. Let's actually, I'll pull up the form here, and we don't have to talk in the abstract or generalities. But let's see, Diana, you mentioned, a group of people or interests that might be better represented. Are there others you can think of, or a question that you want to put to this group around, who else should be nominated?
Well, a number of the neighbors mentioned the history of flooding in the fairgrounds and the impact of development, potential future uses of the fairgrounds on flooding in the neighborhood. And so I think it would be wise to, I don't know what kind of presenter could talk about that, but I think the panel needs to hear about that.
Sorry, having a Google snafu. Lynn, would you remind me how I just get to the front end of the form?
Yeah, probably the easiest way is go into chat and click the link that's up a little bit. I'll repost it again as well.
Thank you.
Sure.
Appreciate that. Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Let's see. Let's give some space before going to Jerry, unless you were responding to that, Jerry, for maybe collaboration around, who might be that person that Diana is looking for, recommending. Or just a more general kind of
yeah, it may respond to her indirectly. I am seeing a heavy preponderance of proponents of the fairgrounds, of the agricultural and 4-H and so on and so forth, for keeping the fairgrounds as is. I see very little of any input from people that would like to see a change in the fairground, a totally different outcome and perspective. And that's really not even represented in our groups, in our 12 groups either. So I find that a little concerning, very concerning, quite frankly. But on the list, there's a huge preponderance of, I would only assume to be advocates to keep the fairground as is. So as that list sits now, I think it's very unbalanced. I would also suggest, it just throw this out there, but perhaps we should consider a limit of the number of nominees, and maybe we should each have a specific number, 3 or something. That would seem like one way to achieve some form of balance within the configurations of our what do we call ourselves? Whatever groups we're representing.
Mhm.
I don't know if that came out clearly. I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah, so just a reminder that this group, this list as it stands is just an impartial brainstorm. Certainly hear you, and point taken around maybe needing to create some more balance there. The kind of way we've conceptualized ensuring that there's balance is through the prioritization process that'll happen next week, where each of you will have equal say over who that list of presenters are. Not so much necessarily in limiting, what comes into the brainstorm at this stage. We're still in everything under the sun can be on the table right now. But Jerry, was there anybody here who you wanted who you wanted to nominate that would kind of help balance things out?
Well, I'm still trying to reach out to nominees. The people that I have presented, I've spoken to. I've reached out to some other people, and I'm still trying to establish the contact and a dialogue with them. I didn't just put someone's name on there. I assumed that the process would be to speak to that person and see if they would be willing to even be presenters. So that's, I don't know if anyone else approached it differently, but that's how I'm approaching it. And I would like to have some more time to be able to reach out to different components. Some of the people I would like to speak to are not easy, readily available on phone call or email. So
that's really helpful to know, Jerry. I'm sorry about that miscommunication. Certainly, I understand the confusion, and there's no need for you all to do any of that kind of back-end coordination work with folks that you're nominating. Essentially, the way that we'll do the prioritization process from this long list is that, the people who rise to the very top, who have consensus or just who have the most support, we'll contact them first, inviting them to speak to the panel. If they say no, if there's a scheduling conflict, if they're not interested, whatever the reason is, we'll just move down that list to people who have, similar degrees of support from this group. So certainly no expectation. This is kind of just a brainstorm, and we don't expect that you all do any of that coordination work with the presenters themselves. Does that help at all? Oh, I think you're on mute.
yeah, it does. I suppose that it would have been, and maybe I missed that. I must have missed that because that was not I just assumed if I'm nominating someone to present that I would speak to them first. And maybe I missed what you just said at a previous meeting. Okay. Yes, that does help. So I could nominate Joe Biden and if he chooses to show up.
Yeah, if the committee, supports Joe with consensus, he accepts.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thanks for clarifying that. I'm sure it was helpful for maybe someone else as well. All right, let's go down the list here to Marion.
Yeah, just to address Jerry's comment, the people that I have nominated, or the organizations that I'd like to see present, one of them being Burbank Housing, they do affordable housing. And from my perspective, the issue needs to be discussed thoroughly, which is why they should be one of the presenters. But there are also other issues regarding affordable housing that also need to be addressed. And just for the record, I mean, I've been in Petaluma for a long time, and I may be one of few people that accept the fact that there may be changes that need to occur. I just think we need to hear from everyone before those decisions are made.
Thank you, Marion. So, a comment from Kim?
So also Jerry's comment about the preponderance of agricultural groups on the list. I think as I added mine, being from the ag sector, certainly erring on the side of over listing folks, just in case people can't present. But I think it's important to remember that the fairgrounds exists because of agriculture, and many of the folks listed can provide some historical context about that. And we talked about that at the last meeting, and understanding the background of the facility itself and its uses. And then as a person who added quite a few names to the list, I also tried to think about and identify those folks who participate in agriculture and it's the changing face of that industry. So I listed Lauren Poncha, for example, who is a plethora of information about regenerative agriculture and does a lot of education around that topic. And the hope, I think, of the community is to keep an agricultural component, acknowledging that change is imminent, but managing change to include agriculture into the future, and the visionaries in our community who are doing that, and how they might contribute to this process and informing the public about new tech in ag, reverting to old tech in ag, and how that is changing the face of our food and fiber system within the district's reach. And I think that's important. I think we all recognize change is going to happen, and how we can keep agriculture as part of this lovely piece of heaven we have in the middle of town is going to be an important part of moving forward.
Thank you. Right, I want to go to Katie, and then I think.
Can we stop sharing the screen by any chance? Because I feel like I'm not seeing anyone.
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to have a little bit more open conversation before we do nominations. So let's go to Katie, and then I think because we haven't heard from a few people, maybe I'll just suggest doing a round robin so that folks can get their nominations in right now if they'd like to. But sorry, first go to Katie.
Thank you. When I put names out there, I tried to think of diverse names that actually use the fairgrounds right now. And I wanted to hear why they need to use the fairgrounds or they choose to use the fairgrounds. And many of them are ag entities, but with me being in education, you work a lot with the ag education community. And everybody I've talked to, I tried to talk to everyone who I recommended. I just haven't heard back from them all within this week. So I didn't just throw names out there without contacting people and see if they had an interest in speaking. So I just wanted you to know, Jerry, that I didn't just throw names out there just because I wanted to throw names out there. And everybody I spoke with knows change is coming, and they're not opposed to change at all. Some of the people I put on there were from other fairs, because other fairs have worked so closely with the community and built their fairgrounds into something that is community-based where everybody could use it. I'd love to get their input on how they did that. And how did the community come together, and what were the issues that they came across, and how did they solve those issues? So, I haven't spoken to anyone on my list that isn't opposed to change. It's just how we go about that and try to meet everyone's needs. So I just wanted to make it clear, I didn't just throw names out there to throw names out there. I did come into contact with almost everyone who did support the idea of change and how can we make this better for everyone.
Thanks, Katie. All right, I think I'm just going to invite around here. Folks can either share kind of broad comments, like we're hearing around themes emerging, groups that are missing, or let's just say you have the option to direct Lynn or myself to behind the scenes actually add something to the Google form for you. I want to give both options here and just make sure that everybody has a chance to speak before we move into next steps. So I'll just go in the order on my screen. Hector, any additions?
Okay, there you go. I figured it out. I do have a couple nominees. I just haven't been able to hook up with them yet. One is from, he's going to represent Rick from the Petaluma Speedway. And I think he's hired a gentleman to do a slideshow or something. And I didn't get his name. And there's two other ones. I just haven't got a hold of people, but I'll make sure I write them down tomorrow. I could still add them tomorrow or this afternoon. It's open for another week.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's open at least through the end of tomorrow. We have to make a decision at the end of this meeting about whether
Okay.
it's going to be open any further than that. But yeah, if you could try to get them in by tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Hector.
Thank you.
And again, feel free to reach out to folks, and also no need to reach out to folks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that I got a few more names added on there.
Okay. All right.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you. Let's see, folks. Anna.
I think I'm in kind of the same situation. I put some names, but I also want to reach out to another names just to make sure, because they're scheduled. So yeah, I don't want them to be surprised.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Let's see here. Who we heard from recently? Anne.
Well, I'm in the other camp. I put all kinds of names in of people I haven't asked, including some luminaries. So, hey, they can say no. But I figure like get it all in there as ideas and keep moving. And I'm really enjoying the dialogue because it's making me think of more ideas. So they're all in there. I'm really, really impressed with what's in here and excited about the process of getting to pick. Thank you.
Okay. Great, thank you. Mark.
I don't have any new names to add at this time. I did reach out to everybody. The one name I did submit for the Halter Project, which does a lot of disaster training and emergency response. She did want to be a presenter, so I did submit her. I was under the impression we were only to submit ones that people confirmed they would like to actually be a presenter. But not at this time. That's the only one I heard back from.
Okay. All right, great. And Shannon?
Yeah, so I have added a handful of people. I agree that I think it's a pretty good cross-section of voices. I wonder if we're missing some more business community stuff. I threw Clover on there, but they're obviously an ag company. I see Strauss, that's an ag company, but are there other business community members that we might want to invite for any reason? I don't know, just occurred to me. I don't have a specific thought about it, but and I'm not thinking of any particular viewpoint when I say that. I'm just throwing it out there. I did put Daily Acts on there when folks started talking about environmental concerns. I'm not super familiar with their work, but I'm sure some of our other committee members are. But so I threw them on there. They might be an interesting contributor in that area. And then my other strong feeling, I guess, would be because the network of fairs in the state originated with the, kind of operates out of the state function. I'm just curious if we might be able to include that perspective. So I threw things on there like and I know it's probably a long shot to get somebody, but, the Department of Food and Ag and the Fairs Division and, all that kind of stuff, just to speak to that bigger view of the network of fairs throughout California. Just seems like an important kind of perspective to include.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Shannon. And Kim.
Thank you. I think I mentioned at the first meeting that there is not a lot of real positive things for teenagers to do in Petaluma. And I could go off on a major soapbox moment about that, but I won't. And so I'm wondering if I noticed someone put Petaluma People Services Center. Do they have a teen outreach or a teen advocate component that could speak to some of the needs of that age group in our community? When I was growing up in Petaluma, we had the Kenilworth Center across from the fairgrounds and tons of activities sponsored through that organization in that part of the city. And then it went away. And I am not aware of activities planned for teens by any specific entity. And as we look at this proposal of maybe a city services center and those kinds of things, could that be included? And I just don't know who the teen advocate person would be. So maybe that could be added in some fashion. And then I certainly think a representative from the Chamber of Commerce as a whole to address the needs of our business community might be appropriate. And then with Daily Acts, I know that Dan Bleakney is on the board of Daily Acts and he has Jupiter Foods downtown. And so he might be a person to reach out to specifically about those topics for Daily Acts and climate and those kinds of things. And yes, Boys and Girls Club Katie would probably be good. Thank you. Or the Kavanaugh Center, I guess, right? So thank you.
Okay. Terrific. And Kim, would you like me to add those things as types of presenters, or would you be willing to just, I think those 3 specific types that you just brought up, could you fill out the form?
I totally can.
Okay, beautiful.
I will.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't want to misrepresent anybody's, 180 characters. So that's definitely my preference. Thank you. Okay, terrific. So I think that we've heard from everybody else on just as a part of this conversation. So I think what I might do is give one more opportunity for anybody to speak on this topic, and if not, move us along to talking about next week, next steps for prioritization, kind of this decision about timeline. So any last questions, calls? Yeah, Jerry, go ahead.
No, I'll take that back. I have 2 other names, but I'll just submit them via the form. And also, I think you mentioned that we were going to discuss extending this deadline a bit. So I'll wait for that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that's where I want to go next, maybe Lynn, just to flip these agenda items a little bit. So, we in the next week, essentially between now and next Monday, need to arrive at a place where we have a list of presenters that have been brainstormed, and everybody has had the time that they need to sit with that list a little bit and be ready to cast your votes, right? So as Lynn talked about last week, that 4-point scale from recommend, support, tolerate, cannot support. So right now, and we also recognize that asking you to kind of play this active representation role and gather input from other groups is, takes time, and we want to make sure that you can fulfill that role. So wanted to put this question back to you all. Right now we have a deadline for the form, for all form submissions to be completed by the end of day tomorrow, Tuesday. That's kind of giving you, I guess, over a week total to work with the form. And then you would have essentially Wednesday to Monday to have that list, do your own kind of research. But it's entirely possible that we could extend that deadline further and that folks would just have a little bit less time to sit with the list before we do our prioritization next Monday. So I'll go to Anne first for maybe a clarifier, and then would love to hear some feedback from this committee about what to do with that question. But Anne.
So in my role representing the other groups in my category, it'd be really helpful to be able to share this entire spreadsheet with those member groups. Are we able to do that?
That's a good question. Yeah, Lynn, you can add something.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that and thinking there may be a middle ground here a little bit where whether we close the deadline, whether we make the deadline tomorrow or not, perhaps we could start sharing that spreadsheet now, because really the deadline was only there so that we could compile it together and give it to you, but it's already there. Yeah. There could be some of both ways. It's already there, and it seems to me that it's yeah, none of that is private information or anything. So unless I hear any objections to that from my colleagues here.
Yeah, that would be really helpful, but it would also mean it'd be great to have another day or so to give folks chance to respond, because again, I'm not sure how good a job I've done at representing the interests of all the organizations in my group. Sorry, I had another stray thought. Oh, well, if it comes back to me, I'll let you know. Thanks.
Actually, if I can just jump in with an administrative thing really fast. If as a maximum, even if we let the deadline open and release this list to everyone that you want to send it to, if we could still have a sort of a maximum of Friday just to be able to process that list and get it ready for the meeting on Monday, that's sort of the very last that I think at least I could handle with getting it ready for Monday.
Yeah, because we'll be setting up another form for everybody to go through that voting process. Okay, that is true though. I think as long as everybody feels comfortable with their name being attached to speaker nominations, being attached to your rationales for recommending those folks, I could see extending the deadline more considerably. I guess now I'll open up the question plus that add-on question. Anyone's uncomfortable with that. Yeah, Anne.
Sorry, I remembered my other question. And this relates to the voting, because there are a lot of sort of repetitive suggestions. So, like I might say, okay, like one speaker out of this sort of group of suggestions. So how will the voting work in regard to that type of thing?
Yeah. So the voting will, so what we're going to propose we do next week is begin, as Lynn mentioned last week, trying to find consensus around some initial introductory presenters. So anyone that just has really strong, or no, I'm sorry, I missed a step. We'll use a straw poll first, because this is going to be over 100 names, a straw poll to kind of do an initial prioritization. Then we'll have plenty of space for discussion, see how many we can find consensus on. And then, anybody who doesn't have that full consensus, we will then either move to consensus -1 to generate the rest of the, X number of spaces for introductory presenters. Or, at the end of the meeting, if we're still a few short, we'll do another prioritization process, and then the top that come out of that process will be added to that list. So trying to kind of balance, not just a purely numbers-based process, plenty of space for deliberation, but that discussion will allow folks to identify, hey, these two people would basically be presenting the same info. Let's just nominate one of them as a group. This is the one that we want to support as a committee. I hope that's clear. All right, and I do realize that we're right at 5:30. I'd like to, if at all possible, I want to grab Katie and Jerry's final comments, and maybe in case anyone has to hop off right now, can I just get a show of hands? Let's see, because it was thrown out there, using Friday as our deadline, with knowing that this presenter response sheet will be available to you at the same link between now and Monday. So straw poll, and then we'll get back around to comments, but just in case anybody has to go right this moment. Let's see.
I don't think I understood the question.
Are you okay with with extending the deadline for the response form to Friday?
Yes.
Okay. And Kim and Marion, I'm not sure if I saw your hands, so let's just go to you first.
No, I'm voting yes.
Okay. Okay, terrific. I didn't think that would be a hard one to get get support for. Okay, I want to make sure that we can come back to questions. So I'm willing to hang out if anybody absolutely has to leave now. Thank you so much. We will be back together next Monday, and you'll be hearing from us between now and then. Really appreciate your time. And for anyone who can stay, let's circle back to Katie.
Thank you.
I want to make sure I understood you right. Did you? And maybe I didn't hear you. So once you get all these names, you're just going to pull straws. You put everyone, or however you want to call it. What if you do get all the straws from one type of representation? So when someone said there's a lot of ag names on here, you're pulling straws. The first 12 names you get are all from the ag community. Are we? I don't know. I guess I don't know how that's a fair process, you know, to encompass everyone.
Yeah, no, not pulling straws. Sorry, maybe my terminology was confusing in saying straw poll. But you all have full control over who these initial presenters are. So we're going to be putting together a form where you can vote on each individual or organization, right? Whatever's in this spreadsheet. And then that'll just help us kind of visualize who's shaking out with more support, less support. And then we'll use consensus or consensus -1 or just prioritization for you all to select who those presenters are.
We will all be voting on all the names on the list of like rating them 1 through 4.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Okay. Yeah. No random selection for this part. This is
that is much more clear.
Sorry if I was unclear at all. Jerry.
So I'm just thinking that you must have some sort of number in mind for a final number of how many presenters you want to have. Would that be accurate to say that?
Absolutely. Yeah, there is limited time during, we have a limited number of hours, so there will be a max. And Lynn and I will have that. We have kind of a range right now, and we'll come to you next week with a more solid cap for that voting process.
Okay.
Yeah. It's about a day and a half that we have to work with for presentations, at least in the first introductory presenters.
And if I can just add something that really fast, that as I think I mentioned to a couple of you who asked me that question in onboarding, this is part of the process design that you are overseeing. So although, we want to give you some loose idea in this process of about how many people this would be a range, that will also be variable. That next week, as mentioned, because of this prioritization method, there is some flexibility here. So it's not like we say there are going to be 8, and next week you will pick exactly 8, and that will be the end of that. We're looking to get as much agreement around some number of introductory presenters next week, and then prioritize, sort of who's next on the list, who's next on the list, who's next on the list. And then when we talk more about process design a little bit later this month and early next month, then more people may fit into those slots, or maybe not.
Awesome. Okay, thanks for clarifying that. I hope that's a clear enough place to leave this. I know it's week 2, and we've gone from introduction like straight into the deep end. So thank you all so much for hanging in there, and please don't hesitate to drop Lynn, me, and Tiffany an email or call to our cell phones. At least I can offer that for Lynn and I anytime between now and next Monday if you have any other questions or want to discuss anything about this process. But thank you for hanging on a few extra minutes. We'll try to be a little bit more timely on the dot 5:30 in the future. But we'll see you all next week. Have a lovely evening.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks.